The city wakes slowly like an old friend stirring from a long dream. In those fragile first hours when the sky is still bruised with night, the streets are empty except for the ones who refuse to let the day begin without them. I pedaled through these quiet veins of concrete and shadow camera, rolling low from my chest, capturing the way light creeps between buildings like hesitant fingers. Every ride feels like eavesdropping on a world that hasn't quite opened its eyes yet. And on this corner, always the same corner, there's Elias. A small man with shoulders bent not from age but from carrying the same hope for decades. His cart is a relic once bright red, now the color of dried rust and faded memories. A single blue flame flickers under a dented aluminum pot. Steam rises in lazy curls, carrying the scent of cardamom and roasted beans across the empty sidewalk. Tiny paper cups lined up like soldiers waiting for orders. He stands behind it, all hands clasped eyes, scanning the horizon as if expecting someone who never quite arrives on time. I first saw him months ago. The air was sharp with winter, my breath fogging the lens. I rode past without stopping another vendor in a city full of them. But something about the way he didn't call out, didn't wave his arms like the others, it stayed with me. He just existed there, patient as stone. So the next morning I came back, and the next, until stopping became part of my route. One black coffee, no sugar. He pours it the same way every time, slow tilt of the pot, a small swirl to mix the grounds that settle at the bottom. He hands it over without a word, but his eyes meet mine for a fraction longer than necessary. Not curiosity. Recognition. Like he knows I'm not just another customer passing through. Over time, pieces slipped out. Not all at once. Stories don't work that way. They leak like light through cracked shutters, small, then brighter. He was a mechanic once. Fixed engines in a noisy garage downtown. Loud tools, oil-stained hands, laughter echoing off metal. His daughter Layla used to sit on a stool in the corner after school, swinging her legs, drawing pictures of cars with wings. She was 8 when she started helping him at home grinding coffee beans in an old wooden mill measuring cardamom pods with tiny fingers. Strong Baba, she'd say, no sugar, like grown-ups, drink it. He'd laugh and ruffle her hair. Those afternoons were the warmest part of his life. Then, one evening, she went to buy bread. Just bread. The corner store was only 2 blocks away. She waved goodbye from the doorway, ponytail bouncing small coins jingling in her pocket. He watched her disappear around the bend. She never came back. The police came. Neighbors whispered. Flyers on every lamppost. Weeks became months. Months became years. The garage closed. Friends drifted. But Elias kept the coffee recipe. Kept the cart. Moved it to this corner, the last place anyone saw her walking toward. Every morning he sets up before dawn. Every evening he packs up after the last customer. And every day he leaves one extra cup on the edge of the cart. Black, no sugar, whisper of cardamom. It cools untouched, a quiet offering to the possibility that tomorrow she might remember. Not everyone is a stranger. There's the taxi driver Kareem who stops every Tuesday. Always in a hurry, always the same joke. Make it quick, Elias, my passengers think I'm a rocket. But he lingers longer than he needs to, talking about his own daughter who's away at university. Elias listens, nods, pours a second cup for free sometimes. Family is fuel, he says quietly, even when they're far. Then there's Aisha, the school teacher. She comes at 7:15 sharp, scarf wrapped tight against the morning chill. She tells Elias about her students, the boy who draws endless pictures of the sea, the girl who reads poetry under her desk. Elias smiles faintly. Sounds like Layla, he murmurs once. Aisha doesn't press. She just sips her coffee and watches the street wake up with him. And the stray cat Gray with one white paw, it appears like clockwork at 6:45. Elias sets a small saucer of milk beside the untouched cup. The cat drinks, then curls up near the wheel of the cart as if guarding it. Elias never pets it. He just lets it stay. I started coming more often, not just for coffee, for the ritual, the way the city changes around him while he remains the same. One morning, I asked the question that had been burning in me. Why do you stay here after all this time? He looked at the horizon where the first rays of sun were cutting through the buildings. Because someone might need it, he said. His voice was steady but thin like paper worn from folding and unfolding too many times. Someone always does. And if Layla is out there, she knows this corner. She knows the smell of this coffee. If she's lost, this is the light I leave on for her. He told me more that day, How Layla used to sing while grinding beans, off-key, happy songs from the radio. How she'd beg him to tell stories about faraway places while the coffee brewed. How one night, after a long day, she fell asleep on his shoulder, small hand clutching his shirt. "I promised her," he whispered. "I promised I'd always be here when she came home." The words hung between us like steam. I didn't know what to say, so I just sat on the curb, coffee cooling in my hands, watching the street fill with people who had no idea they were walking past a quiet miracle every day. Years passed differently for Elias, not in birthdays or holidays, in cups poured, in extra saucers for the cat, in the small nods from regulars who sense something deeper but never ask. He doesn't complain. He doesn't despair out loud. He simply continues. Because stopping would mean admitting the light is out, and he refuses. Some mornings I ride slower past his corner. I watch from afar as he sets up. The flame lit, the pot filled, the extra cup placed just so, and I think this is what hope looks like when no one's watching. Not fireworks, not grand gestures, just one man, one cart, one cup waiting in the cold. I still ride these streets at dawn, still stop for coffee, still see the untouched cup cooling on the edge, and every time something inside me shifts, a reminder that the most powerful promises aren't shouted. They're kept in silence day after day until the world notices. Until perhaps one morning a woman with familiar eyes walks up, sees the faded red cart, smells the cardamom and says, "Baba, is that still how you make it?" Elias would pour the coffee, strong, no sugar, and hand it over without a word. Because some homecomings don't need explanations. They just need the light left on. Until then he waits, and the city whispers his story back to him one steaming cup at a time. The city has many faces, but the one it shows at dawn is the most honest. No crowds yet to hide behind, no noise to drown the small sounds, just stone walls still cool from the night, faint echoes of distant roosters, and the slow creak of shutters being lifted by hands that have done the same motion for decades. I ride in that hour when the light is thin and uncertain, camera low against my chest, capturing the way shadows stretch long and thin across the pavement like fingers reaching for something they can never quite touch. There is a small square near the old fountain where 3 alleys converge like veins meeting at a heart. The fountain itself is dry, its marble basin cracked and filled with dust and fallen leaves. A single iron bench sits bolted to the ground, rust eating at its legs. No one famous ever sat there, no plaques, no stories written about it. Yet every morning, long before the first prayer call drifts over the rooftops, she is there. A girl, perhaps 14, perhaps 15. Thin frame under a faded blue cardigan that hangs loose on her shoulders, sleeves rolled up twice to fit her arms. Hair pulled back with a piece of red ribbon that has frayed at the edges and lost most of its shine. In front of her, spread on a piece of old cloth directly on the stone, sits a single plastic bucket. Inside it, no more than 15 or 20 rose stems, red mostly, some pink, 1 or 2 white, never arranged in neat bunches. Just cut, wrapped loosely in yesterday's newspaper, thorns still sharp, petals still holding the night's dew. She doesn't call out, doesn't stand and wave the flowers at passers-by, doesn't promise love, luck, or forgiveness like the vendors in the bigger markets. She sits quietly, knees drawn up to her chest, back against the fountain's edge, eyes following the pigeons that hop around the dry basin, looking for crumbs that aren't there. When someone approaches, she lifts her gaze not eagerly, not desperately, just calmly, as if she has already decided long ago that most people will keep walking. I first noticed her months ago, rode past without stopping. The bucket was fuller then, almost overflowing. Red roses mostly. She looked up for a second as my shadow passed over her cloth, then returned to watching the pigeons. Something about the stillness made me circle back the next morning, and the morning after. The first time I bought one, it was a red rose. I handed her a coin. She took it without looking at it, placed it in the small metal tin beside her, and passed me the stem. No words, no smile, just the smallest nod, the kind strangers give when they share the same patch of shade on a hot day. The second time, another red. Same silence. The third time, pink. Still nothing. On the 4th morning I spoke. "What's your name?" "Noor," she said. Her voice was quiet, almost swallowed by the early wind moving through the alleys. How long have you been coming here every day? Since I was 9. With your family? My grandmother used to sit beside me. She died last winter. Now it's just me. She said it plainly, without drama, the way someone reports that the bus is late. I wanted to ask how old she was when her grandmother left, why she kept coming alone, where the flowers came from. But her eyes returned to the pigeons, and the question stayed in my throat. Over the following weeks, I learned her routine the way you learn a street you ride every day, without asking, just by watching. She arrives when the stars are still sharp, carrying the bucket balanced on her head, wrapped in an old shawl to protect the petals from the dew. The flowers come from her uncle's small plot of land on the edge of the city, a patch no bigger than a living room. He cuts them after midnight so they stay fresh through the heat of the day. She walks nearly 3 kilometers each way before first light, steps careful on the broken sidewalks, bucket steady as if it were part of her body. She sits until the sun climbs high enough to make the square unbearable. Sells what she can, sometimes 3 stems, sometimes 12, sometimes none. Whatever remains at the end of the day she gives away. To the old women who sit near the mosque entrance begging quietly, to the street cats that gather when the square empties, to children who pass by with wide eyes and empty hands. She never throws a single flower away. Not once. One morning the bucket held only 8 roses, fewer than usual. I asked why. The land is tired, she said. Uncle says the well is lower every summer. If we take too much now, next spring there will be nothing left, so I bring less. Better a few good ones than many that die before noon. She spoke like someone who had already done the math in her head. Petals versus water, days versus seasons, survival versus beauty. I started coming earlier. Sometimes I brought bread from the bakery that opens at 4:30, sometimes a bottle of water. She never refused, but she never asked for anything either. Once, she offered me a white rose for free. I tried to pay. She shook her head. For listening, she said. You always listen. I took the rose. It had no scent yet, too early. But the thorn caught my thumb. A tiny bead of blood appeared. She noticed, reached into her tin, pulled out a small square of clean cloth, and handed it to me without a word. I wrapped my thumb. She returned to watching the pigeons. The heat came harder as summer deepened. The square baked. The fountain stayed dry. Noor kept coming. Same cardigan, same ribbon, now almost pink from sun and dust. Same bucket, smaller every week. One morning, she wasn't there. The bench empty, the cloth gone. I waited 30 minutes, then rode on with a tightness in my chest I couldn't name. She returned 2 days later. Different spot, not the square. A narrow side street near the covered market, where the buildings lean close and the sun reaches the ground later. No fountain, no bench. Just a flattened cardboard box on the ground and the bucket with 5 roses, 3 red, 2 white. Her eyes were rimmed red, not from crying, but from nights without enough sleep. Uncle is sick, she said before I opened my mouth. He can't cut the flowers anymore. The land needs him. I went to help, but I don't know how to choose the right stems. These are the last ones he cut before he stayed in bed. I sat on the ground beside her. For the first time, she didn't look away when I spoke. What happens now? I don't know. My aunt wants us to move to her house in the new neighborhood. She has a small shop. She says I can help her sell cloth instead of flowers. But cloth doesn't smell like morning. Cloth doesn't need water. Cloth doesn't die if you forget it for a day. She touched one of the white roses. The petals trembled under her fingertip. These were supposed to be for weddings. White for new beginnings. Red for love that lasts. Now they're just waiting. I didn't buy any that day. I couldn't bring myself to take them. Instead, I asked if I could stay until she packed. She nodded. We sat in silence as the street slowly woke. A baker rolled up his shutter with a loud clang. 2 boys ran past kicking a crushed plastic bottle. An old woman shuffled by, bought 1 red rose, paid with small coins, and whispered a blessing before disappearing around the corner. Noor thanked her so softly I almost missed it. When the sun finally reached the cardboard, she began to gather the stems, wrapped each one carefully in its newspaper scrap, lifted the bucket onto her head with the same steady motion she had used since she was 9. Before she left, she turned to me. "Tomorrow I may come here again, or maybe another place. If you don't find me, thank you for the mornings you sat." She walked away. The red ribbon caught a stray beam of sunlight, a small flag of color against the gray stone. For the next week, the square stayed empty. The side street too. I rode every dawn, checking corners, fountains, benches, cardboard patches. Nothing. On the 10th day, I saw her again. Different alley. Closer to the river this time. No fountain, no bench, no shade. Just her, the bucket, and 4 roses. 2 red, 2 white. She looked thinner. The cardigan hung looser. But her eyes were clear. "Uncle is better," she said when I stopped. "He can sit up now. He told me to keep going. Even if it's only 4. Even if it's only 1. Because someone might need a flower today. Even if they don't know it yet." She handed me a white rose. This time I took it. Paid more than it cost. She accepted the extra coins without protest, placed them carefully in the tin. After that morning, I began to see her in different places. Sometimes near the market entrance, sometimes by the school gate when classes let out, sometimes back at the old square. Always early. Always quiet. Always with fewer flowers than the day before, but never none. One evening, long after sunset, I rode past the square again. The fountain dark, the bench empty, but on the ground near the basin lay a single white rose. Fresh, thorn still sharp, no bucket. No girl, no ribbon. I picked it up, held it under the street lamp. The petals glowed pale in the yellow light. I still ride at dawn, still look for small buckets, for red ribbons, for eyes that wait without demanding. Sometimes I think I catch a glimpse, a thin shadow slipping around a corner, a flash of blue cardigan, the faint scent of roses carried on the wind. I don't know if Noor still sells flowers. I don't know if her uncle ever walked the land again. I don't know if she moved or stayed or found another way to keep giving what little the earth allowed. But the streets remember. They remember the girl who never threw a flower away, who carried roses 3 kilometers before light so someone, anyone, might find beauty on an ordinary morning, who gave even when there was almost nothing left to give. And every time I ride past an empty fountain or a dry bench, I slow down. I listen. Because some whispers don't need words. They just need someone to keep riding by, morning after morning, until the city itself starts telling the story back. The next night, it was closer. 10 meters from where I usually stop. Same tilt of the head, same stained hood. The light reached farther now, catching the edges of the figure. The sleeves were too long. The hands, if they were hands, curled inward like claws that had forgotten how to open. I stayed longer than I should have. Watched, waited. It didn't move. After 20 minutes, I left. The chain creaked again as I passed. Longer this time. Slower. Night after night, it drew closer. Never sudden, never in a way I could catch the movement. 1 meter, 2, 3, always under the light, always silent. The flame never wavered. The air grew thicker each time, my breathing louder in my helmet. The camera captured it all, shadow stretching longer across the stone, hood lowering slightly, fingers twitching once, then still. On the 8th night, it stood at the archway itself, blocking the exit. The lantern light poured directly onto the figure now. I could see the outline of shoulders too narrow, arms too long, fabric torn in places that revealed nothing underneath, no sound except my own pulse and the faint, rhythmic creak of the chain above. I whispered, barely audible, "What do you want?" The chain stopped creaking. Silence so complete it hurt. Then one word, soft, rasping, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. Closer. I didn't move. Couldn't. The figure lifted its head slowly. No face, just deeper shadow. The light pulsed once slow, like a heartbeat held underwater, then steadied. The word echoed in my helmet long after it should have faded. I backed away, wheels rolling backward over stone. The figure didn't follow. It stayed exactly where it was. But the light reached farther, caught the walls. And on those walls I saw them scratches. Thousands. Not random. Circles inside circles. Names scratched and crossed out, dates going back decades, some fresh, some old enough the plaster had crumbled around them, one name repeated more than the others, scratched deeper, crossed out harder. My name. Not the name I use now, the name I was born with, the one I haven't heard in years. Scratched into the stone beside dates that matched nights I had been here, nights I thought I was alone. I rode out, fast. The chain rattled violently as I passed under the archway. Not wind, not gravity, something pulling it hard, deliberately. I didn't return for 2 weeks, told myself I never would. Changed routes, avoided the tannery, avoided narrow lanes after midnight, slept with lights on, checked locks twice. Watched the footage once, only once. Saw the figure, saw the scratches, saw my name. Turned it off, deleted nothing, couldn't. But the pull returned, stronger, like a hook lodged deep in the chest, pulling every time the clock passed midnight. When I finally rode back, the lantern was still burning. The figure was gone, but the courtyard wasn't empty. On the ground beneath the lantern lay a single object, a small brass key, old, tarnished, the kind that opens doors no one remembers. Next to it, scratched fresh into the stone, "Come closer next time," or "It comes to you." I didn't touch the key, didn't stay, rode out faster than ever. The chain above rattled so hard it sounded like laughter, low, wet, endless. After that night, things began to change inside my head. I started noticing the same stains on my own sleeves, dark patches that weren't there before, the same tilt in my reflection when I passed mirrors at night, the same slow delay in my shadow when I walked under streetlights. I told myself it was fatigue, imagination, lack of sleep, but the scratches appeared on other walls now, not just in the lane, on buildings I passed on my normal routes, on fences, on doors, always the same circles, always my name scratched beside dates I didn't remember being anywhere near. I began to hear the chain creak even when I wasn't riding, in my apartment, in the shower, in the middle of conversations with people who didn't exist. I started talking to myself to drown it out. But my own voice sounded delayed, like it was coming from someone standing just behind me. The city after midnight is no longer the city I thought I knew. The streets I rode during the day become unfamiliar. The corners I once ignored now remember me. The air thickens not with cold, but with something heavier, something that presses against my skin like invisible fingers tracing the outline of my thoughts. Streetlights dim at irregular intervals, as if conserving energy for something more important than illumination. The wind carries sounds from places that shouldn't exist anymore. I ride in that hour, not because I choose to, but because something has already chosen for me. There is a lane behind the abandoned tannery, so narrow the walls nearly brush my shoulders. Plaster peels in long strips like dead skin. Old posters cling to the stone advertisements for shops that closed 30 years ago, faces faded to ghosts. At the end of the lane, an iron door rusted shut, its handle bent as though someone once tried to tear it open and gave up. Beyond the door, through a low archway half collapsed, lies a courtyard no larger than a grave. No windows look into it. No doors lead out except the way you came. In the center of that courtyard hangs a lantern. Brass, dented, glass cracked, in 3 places like frozen spiderwebs. It swings from a chain hooked to a nail driven so deep into the wall that the stone cracked around it decades ago. Every night, without fail, it is lit. Not with oil, not with a wick, not with electricity, just a pale, steady flame, white-blue, cold, unchanging. It doesn't flicker with the wind. It doesn't dim when clouds cover the moon. It doesn't brighten when you stare too long. It simply exists. And the light it casts makes your shadow look wrong too tall, too thin, moving a fraction of a second slower than you do. I first saw it by accident. Rode past the archway on a night when sleep refused to come. The flame caught the corner of my eye like a needle in the dark. I stopped, stared. The light stretched across the courtyard, touching the walls, the ground, the closed iron door. No insects circled it. No moths. Nothing living wanted to be near it. I left after less than a minute, told myself it was a forgotten security light. A reflection from somewhere else. A trick of tired eyes. But the next night I came back. The flame was still there, exactly the same height, exactly the same color. I stood longer this time, watched, waited for it to change. It didn't. The chain didn't sway. The glass didn't reflect my face clearly, only a blurred shape that didn't quite match the way I stood. I rode away faster than I intended. The wheels sounded too loud in the silence, my breathing too loud in my helmet. The camera kept rolling. I didn't watch the footage when I got home. I didn't need to. I remembered every detail. Night after night I returned. Always later, always alone. The closer I got to the archway, the heavier the air became. Not cold, thick, like breathing through wet cloth. The stones under the tires felt softer, as if the ground was giving way just enough to slow me down. The walls seemed to lean in farther each time. The posters on them changed, new faces appeared in old advertisements, faces that looked almost familiar, almost like people I once knew but couldn't name. One night, the lantern was not alone. A shape stood beneath it, tall, thin, hooded, cloth dark and heavy, stained in places that looked wet but weren't. No face visible, just deeper shadow where a face should be. The figure didn't move, didn't breathe, just stood, arms hanging loose at its sides, head tilted slightly to the left as if listening to something I couldn't hear. The flame above burned brighter for one slow heartbeat, then returned to normal. I stopped 20 meters away, my pulse hammered against my ribs. The figure didn't turn, didn't acknowledge me, but I felt it knew exactly where I was. I backed the bike slowly, turned, rode out. Didn't look behind once. The chain above the lantern creaked as I passed under the archway, once, twice, 3 times. Not wind, not gravity, something pulling it, deliberately. One night I woke up standing in the middle of my room holding a brass key I didn't own. The same key from the courtyard. I didn't remember picking it up. I didn't remember leaving the apartment. The front door was unlocked. My shoes were muddy. My camera was still recording hours of footage showing me walking the same lane over and over, stopping at the archway, staring at the lantern, whispering the same question. What do you want? And in every frame, the figure is closer, not moving, just closer. I still ride at night. I still record. I still look for other lanes, other lights, other shadows, because part of me needs to know what happens if I go closer next time. And part of me already knows the lantern never goes out. The chain never stops creaking. And the whisper that follows it never forgets your name. Because sometimes when I look at the footage later, I see myself standing under the lantern hood up, arms too long, head tilted slightly to the left, and I realize the figure was never waiting for me. It was waiting to become me.
The city remembers everything you try to forget, every shortcut you took to avoid someone, every night you walked faster because the street felt too quiet, every time you looked over your shoulder and told yourself it was nothing. It keeps those moments pressed between its cracked pavements like photographs no one asked to keep. After midnight, when the last bar lights die and the last footsteps fade, the streets stop pretending to be empty. They become attentive, patient, as if every building is tilting slightly closer, listening for the precise second you realize the rhythm of your own steps is no longer yours alone. I still ride in that hour, not to chase stories. The stories chase me now. The camera stays strapped to my chest. I no longer check the battery, the storage, the lens cap. It records anyway, frame after frame, breath after breath, like it understands something I keep trying to erase. There is a long boulevard that cuts through the old quarter like a scar, wide enough for 3 cars to pass without touching, lined with plane trees whose leaves fall in slow, deliberate spirals even when the air is dead still. At night, the street lamps burn a dull, nauseous orange, the kind of light that makes skin look jaundiced and eyes look sunken. Halfway down the boulevard lies a small traffic circle with a dry fountain at its center. No water has run through it since before the war my grandfather refused to talk about. People call it the circle of the sleeper. No one remembers why, or no one wants to. For weeks I tried to avoid it. I told myself the road surface was smoother 2 streets over, the air less stale, the shadows less personal. But every time I attempted to turn away, my wrists, my own wrists, refused the command. The handlebars drifted back toward the boulevard as though guided by a memory older than mine. So I rode it again, and each time I passed the fountain, I felt it, a second rhythm, not behind me, not precisely. It was more intimate than that, a parallel cadence, a heartbeat that matched mine exactly, but always delayed by half a beat. When I slowed to catch my breath, it slowed. When I accelerated to outrun the sound, it accelerated, never overtaking, never falling behind. Just there, mirroring, patient, waiting for the moment I would admit that my own motion had become a duet. At first I blamed physics, the echo of my tires bouncing between the high walls, the wind tunneling through the plane trees, my own breathing trapped inside the helmet, amplified by fear. But the sound wasn't coming from the ground. It came from slightly to my right, slightly behind. Always the same distance, always the same delay. A second set of shoes, soft-soled, careful, deliberate, stepping exactly where I stepped, but on a surface that wasn't there. I began to speak to it, quietly at first, inside the helmet. Who are you? No answer. Why are you walking with me? Silence. What do you want? The footsteps continued, steady, unhurried, as if the question itself was just another note in the rhythm we now shared. I started leaving voice notes on my phone while I rode, asking questions, making accusations, begging for it to stop. I played them back later in my apartment with every light on and every door double locked. In every recording, there was an extra voice, my voice, repeating every word I had spoken, but half a second later, like an echo that had learned how to imitate perfectly. And in the silences between my sentences, another sound, very faint, a low, wet chuckle, not cruel, not amused, just satisfied, as if someone had finally been recognized after waiting a very long time. I tried everything, different routes, different hours, writing with music so loud it hurt my ears, writing in complete silence, turning off the lights and coasting in darkness. It didn't matter. The footsteps were always there, always the same initial delay, then closer, then no delay at all. I began to feel the weight of another body on the bike, not heavy, just present. A second center of gravity that leaned when I leaned, turned when I turned, braked when I braked. Sometimes I felt fingers, cold, thin, impossibly long, rest lightly on my shoulders, not gripping, just resting, as if reminding me they had always been allowed to be there. I started noticing changes in myself. My shadow on the pavement grew taller, thinner. It moved a fraction slower than I did. When I raised my hand to wave at no one, the shadow waved back. But the fingers were longer, the wrist bent at a strange angle. When I stopped moving, the shadow sometimes kept going for one more step before freezing. My reflection in shop windows at 3 a.m. began to smile when I didn't, a small, patient smile, the kind you give when you know something the other person hasn't figured out yet. My breathing changed. It became deeper, slower, more deliberate. Sometimes I caught myself exhaling when I hadn't inhaled. Sometimes I inhaled when I should have been exhaling. My lungs felt shared. I began to forget small things, where I parked the bike last night, whether I locked the door, whether I had already eaten dinner, whether I had spoken to anyone that day. The memories blurred at the edges like wet ink on paper. And in the center of every blurred memory, there was always that second rhythm, matching, waiting. One night I rode straight to the circle of the sleeper on purpose. I stopped in the exact center, turned off the camera, sat on the edge of the dry fountain, waited. The footsteps stopped beside me. I didn't look. I couldn't, but I spoke aloud for the first time. What do you want? This time the answer came in my own voice, soft, calm, from directly behind my left ear. To walk with you, until you forget you were ever walking alone. I closed my eyes. The air became very still. No wind, no distant cars, no heartbeat in my ears. Just the faint creak of the fountain stones settling under invisible weight. When I opened my eyes again, the boulevard was empty. No footsteps, no breath, no second shadow. But when I stood up, my legs felt heavier, my balance slightly off, as if I had been carrying someone for a very long time and only just noticed. I rode home slowly, no hurry, no fear, just quiet acceptance. The camera stayed off. I didn't turn it on again, because I already knew what it would show, me riding alone. But in every frame, every single frame, a second figure, tall, thin, hooded, sitting directly behind me on the saddle, arms wrapped loosely around my waist, head resting gently on my shoulder, face hidden in shadow, smiling. I still ride at night. The footsteps are quieter now. They don't need to follow anymore. They're already inside the rhythm, inside my breathing, inside my shadow, inside my reflection, inside the pauses between my thoughts. And every time I look down at the pavement, my shadow waves back, even when I'm not moving my hand, even when I'm standing perfectly still, even when I'm not there at all. Because sometimes when I catch my reflection in a shop window at 3 a.m., I see two faces looking back. One is mine, the other is mine too. But it's smiling in a way I never learned how to smile. And it's waiting for me to forget which one is real, waiting for me to ask the question I already know the answer to: who is riding this bike? And when I finally do ask, when the words leave my mouth in the dark, I already know the voice that will answer. Mine, but softer, calmer, closer. And it will say, without hesitation, we both are, and we always have been. The city is a collector of gazes. Every glance you cast in passing, every stare you avoid, every reflection you ignore, it gathers them all, storing them in the hollows of its windows like secrets in locked drawers. Those windows aren't just glass, they're thresholds. After midnight, when the last lights in the apartments flicker out and the river runs silent, they stop reflecting the world outside. They start showing the one inside, the one that's always been there, waiting for you to look a little too long, waiting for you to recognize that the eyes staring back were never just yours. I ride then, not to escape the eyes. Escape is a story I stopped telling myself. I ride because the motion blurs the edges of what's real and what's remembered. The camera is still on my chest. It records without pause, frame after frame, glance after glance, like it knows the truth I keep trying to unsee. There is a row of old apartment buildings along the riverfront, facades crumbling like forgotten promises, bricks weathered by rain that never quite washes the grime away. The windows are stacked in neat rows, most dark at night, some glowing with the cold blue of screens or the warm yellow of lamps. But one window, always the same one, third floor, second from the left, never changes. It's lit, not bright, dim, yellowish, like the pages of an old book left open too long, curtains half drawn, thin enough to hint at shapes behind but never reveal them completely. I passed it the first time without a second thought, just another window in a city full of eyes. But the next night I felt it, a pull, not physical, deeper, like a thread hooked into my gut, tugging gently but insistently. I slowed, looked up. The window was the same, lit, curtains half drawn, a silhouette inside, vague, human-shaped, standing still, facing out, toward the river, toward me. I rode on, told myself it was someone insomnia-struck, staring at the water for company. But the silhouette didn't move, didn't shift, just stood, watching. I felt its gaze on my back long after I turned the corner. The next night I rode the same path. The window was lit again, the silhouette there, same position, same stillness. I stopped this time, stared back. The shape didn't flinch, didn't wave, didn't turn away, just watched. I felt my own reflection in the glass, overlaid on the silhouette. My face, but not quite. The eyes in the reflection seemed wider, hungrier, as if they were seeing something I couldn't. I left, faster. The thread in my gut tightened as I rode away, as if something was reluctant to let go, reluctant to be forgotten. Night after night I returned, always after midnight, always the same window, always lit, always the silhouette. But each time it was closer to the glass. Not suddenly, gradually. One night the outline was faint, deep in the room. The next a step forward, the next two. The curtain seemed thinner with every visit, the details sharper, shoulders slumped slightly as if carrying a weight, head tilted just a fraction to the left, eyes, holes of darkness, fixed on the spot where I stopped. I began to speak to it, whispering inside my helmet. Who are you? No answer. What do you see when you look out? Silence. Why me? Why this window? Why now? The silhouette shifted for the first time, a small lean forward, as if straining to hear, as if my words were pulling it closer. I started leaving voice notes describing the window, the building, the silhouette, the way the light never flickered, never dimmed, never warmed. I played them back in my apartment, lights on, doors bolted, windows covered. In every recording, there was an extra whisper. My voice, but not my voice. Repeating what I said, but with a question at the end. Why not you? I tried to ignore it. Changed routes, avoided the riverfront entirely. But every path I took looped back. The handlebars turned on their own, the thread pulled harder. When I reached the window, the silhouette was even closer. Pressed against the glass now, hands flat on the pane, face almost visible, but not quite. Just enough to see the eyes, wide, unblinking, matching my stare perfectly. I felt changes in myself. My reflection in other windows began to linger. When I turned away, it stayed a second longer, watching me leave. My shadow under street lamps grew doubles, faint outlines that overlapped mine but didn't quite align. My breathing fogged the helmet visor in patterns that looked like fingerprints from the inside. I forgot things more often, not small things anymore, whole nights. I'd wake with mud on my shoes, the bike parked outside, the camera full of footage I didn't remember taking. In the videos, I saw myself stopping at the window, staring, whispering questions, the silhouette answering with gestures, head tilts, hand presses, slow nods. But in the playback, my own mouth moved too, answering myself. One night I rode to the building on purpose, stopped directly below the window, turned off the headlamp, sat on the curb, waited. The silhouette leaned closer, pressed its face to the glass. For the first time I saw details. Hair like mine, jaw like mine, eyes wide like mine. I spoke aloud. What do you want? The answer came in my own voice, soft, calm, from above, from inside the window. To see what you see, to be where you are, to remember what you forgot. I closed my eyes. The air thickened. No wind, no river sound, no heartbeat. Just the faint creak of the building settling as if something inside was shifting its weight. When I opened my eyes, the window was dark, the silhouette gone. But when I stood, my legs felt lighter, my balance too perfect, as if I had left something behind. I rode home, slowly. The thread was gone, no pull, no resistance. The camera stayed off. I didn't turn it on again because I already knew what it would show. Me, riding alone. But in every frame, every single frame, a second face in the reflections of passing windows. Mine, smiling in a way I never smiled, waiting for me to look back. I still ride at night. The window is dark now. It doesn't need to watch anymore. It's already looking through my eyes, and every time I glance over my shoulder, I see nothing. But I feel the smile on my own face, the one I never learned how to make, the one that knows what I forgot, and is waiting for me to remember that I was the one in the window all along, watching myself ride by, night after night, until the city forgets which one is real, until I forget which eyes are mine, which thoughts are mine, which life is mine. Because sometimes, when I ride past other windows, I see my face in them too, staring out, waiting for me to come closer, waiting for me to wave, and when I do, the reflection waves back, but slower, with a smile that knows it's not alone anymore, and the city watches it all, keeping the gaze, keeping the secret, keeping the thread pulled tight, forever.